I'll be talking about creativity while recording myself in the simplest possible talking head, plain background, lazy kind of way possible. And I'll also be talking about hyperrealism while putting a watercolor filter over this to make it look less realistic. Lots of creative vision here. Anyway, so a lot of people have had strong feelings about Spider-Man and New Break of New Dawn, New Day, Spider-Man Brand New Day. In particular, this shot right here has gotten some negative reactions, although I have seen a few people react to the negative reactions and complaining about realism nerds. I'm somewhat of a realism nerd myself, to an extent, but I think it has gone overboard. So personally, my first gut reaction was, what's going on here? Why is there suddenly this cavernous space inside of his mask that's supposed to be skin tight and all that? But that's kind of the problem, isn't it? Have we become lazy in our interpretation of art, or I guess our consumption of conveyors of corporate profit? I could justify my gut reaction by being like, well, it's not so much about the realism and more about being taken out of the experience by suddenly seeing this huge artificial space inside of his mask and seeing the inside of his mask in an unnatural way and all that. But really, clearly, this serves a purpose. There's an artistic vision behind it. It's not that many layers deep, at least the way I see it. Maybe I'm just too dumb, but I would interpret this as an attempt to bring the viewer closer to Peter as a person and doing it in a kind of literal, visual way to represent the figurative way, all right? So we're kind of with him, we're taking part in his experience inside the mask, whereas everybody else only sees the outside of the mask, only sees the hero. And that's the difference as far as realism nerds are concerned. This is expressing something with intent. There is no message in a gun firing a bullet with the entire cartridge still attached, or a revolver firing 8 times before reloading the 6-shot cylinder, or an entire suit of steel plate armor protecting about as much as soaked cardboard. But I have to wonder if movies and video games, I'll get to that in a moment, have dumbed down the experience so much and removed layers to the point where we don't get it anymore because we're used to being served everything in a matter-of-fact, it is what it is, superficial way. It's like layers of an onion have been peeled away and then someone has 3D printed a more detailed, more appealing version of the onion on top of it as a facade. And then most of it is hollow. Maybe I'm going too far with that. Everything's so much more detailed, ultra high definition. Everything has to be photorealistic, or at least that's what the empty corpo suits think we want. All right, so to tie video games into it, which is a relevant tangent, trust me, at least I think so. I've been gaming since the 80s, since the Atari 2600. Not that I need gamer cred to comment on this. It really doesn't do anything other than show how old I am. But anyway, I've been along for the ride the entire time and seen a lot of changes, seen games develop from super crude graphics to the kind of stuff you see now where every little pore in the skin texture is visible, every reflection, every eyelash, every pimple, it's all there in larger than life detail, more than you could see in the real world unless you really invade someone's personal space to the point where you need to be punched in the face. Who is all this hyperrealism for? Again, as someone who's been along the entire time, there was an era where we were super impressed by all the advancements in graphics, right? It was like, in the beginning, we were very easily impressed by ultra blocky, low poly things, characters that didn't even have fingers and all of that. We were just like, whoa, it's actually 3D, man, radical. And then it progressed from there. Oh, now you have all the lighting effects, and now you have, super high resolution textures and this and that and the other, and physics. You had more and more elements of realism coming in ways that weren't done before and weren't really even possible before, just technically speaking. So now developers could flex not only the hardware and the advanced graphics and all of that, but also all the effort they put in, right? It was supposed to wow us. It did, and it added to the gameplay in some ways. Stealth mechanics, for example, builds upon a certain level of realism, right? Oh, your footsteps make sounds, and that sound carries, and the guards can hear it. And when you take one guy's head off with a bone saw, the other is like, must have been the wind. Realism. Suddenly, developers started doing research, looking into military tactics and how a firearm that is in the game actually works mechanically, so they can represent it accurately, and the way the characters reload is accurate, etc., etc. So many things, clothes move in ways that you would see in the real world. All of that, right? Cool. But then it seems like they kept pushing it further and further and further to get to this level of hyperrealism, and artistic expression kind of falls by the wayside because, well, the real world is a certain way, right? I mean, you can represent fictional characters and zombies and monsters and whatever in hyper-realistic ways. You can do that, but that still nails you on a certain art style, if you even want to call it that. Real life is not an art style, right? It's just the real world, whatever. All right, so everything has gotten a little more samey, particularly looking at this DLSS stuff that people have been commenting on. In Resident Evil 9, there is a before and after example of no brain, not Claire, Grace. So DLSS adds detail, higher fidelity, if you will, but generifies the character. It doesn't even look like Grace anymore. This is an entirely different person, and it's this layer of AI slop where everything looks the same, right? Whereas the original style, even though it is advanced graphics, so it is high definition and all of that, but it has a certain style to it. There's a bit of a Capcom style to it, right? As opposed to just whatever, run-of-the-mill photorealism. And I'm concerned by how empty corporate suits are taking humans more and more out of one of the most human things to do other than eating and shitting, which is artistic expression. So now machines are doing it. And even when humans are doing it, there is more of a push to kind of make it all uniform, where there's less individual distinction. Back then you could look at a certain game, you're like, that's a Konami game. I recognize that art style. That's a Nintendo game. That's a Capcom game, whatever, you gotta tell. That's less the case now. And particularly movies. Like, there's so many CGI scenes that you could sort of copy and paste from one movie to the other, and it's like you wouldn't bat an eye. It all looks the same. And it's getting worse. Now there are automated processes of sucking the soul out of a creation and pasting this samey, generic layer on top of it. So now it seems people, and I'm including myself, are starting to have trouble recognizing even the most basic layer of meaning below the surface, like in this shot here. It's like, oh yeah, it's bringing us closer to Peter Parker, the person, beyond or below, underneath, whatever, Spider-Man, the character, the hero, all of that, right? Isn't that concerning? And again, I say that as someone who can appreciate elements of realism if they're implemented for a reason, if it adds something of value. But the value now is unfortunately just shareholder profit. That's the focus, right? So I suspect this is going to keep getting worse. Or maybe eventually the pendulum will swing back. Eventually people will be so fed up with how generic and soulless everything is that they'll start to boycott the crap and insist on, hey, we want actual real art made by real human beings that actually that have heart and soul and that express something. So back to indie productions, I guess. So I hope, but we'll see, I guess. Anyway, thanks for listening to all this.